But even then, he showed his very indefatigable spirit, his resiliency, because he never let that get him down. And so determined was he to be able to help his family, his parents and his siblings. He found work in a major private university as an admin assistant. At
Whoa.
first, at first they were hesitant to hire him, but he convinced them that he could do the work because he had learned enough to be really fast at typing.
That's
You know,
amazing.
so he could type really, really fast because back then his sight was okay. So he typed, he did filing work, he did admin work for for the professors of that school, and he was getting paid for that. And it got so that he was in fact interviewed by another news outlet to talk about his special abilities, as it were. And I think the school was thinking about offering him a scholarship for for him to continue growing.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Leader's Edge. Today is season 12, episode 3, with guest, our co host, Dino Santos. He will be talking about keeping hopes up despite dire limitations. Dino,
Okay, thank you so much, Raul, and I do appreciate your taking time to be a host this time around. Uh, it is rather enjoyable to be a guest now and then. First of all, for those who don't know me yet, I am also the talent and social media director of the Southeast Asia Speakers and Trainers Bureau. I am a DTM, Toastmaster, and a member of the Hall of Fame. Um, as an avid YouTuber, I like to create channels like this and interview individuals who exhibit unique knowledge about things or unique capabilities. And so, Raul, what I'd like to share with you and our viewers is my experience when I met a truly, truly resilient individual. His name is Raymond Cuevas. He just happens to be the elder brother of a friend, Jack Cuevas. They both live with their family, their mom and their other relatives, over in a town in Cuenca, Batangas. And so you can imagine during the Taal volcano eruptions, which incidentally, just a few kilometers from their place, you can view in
yes.
all its blazing glory. So during the time that the volcano was exploding, they were evacuated by by the authorities for their own safety. And so I took a trip there before the volcano became restless, and I met him for the first time. And of course, I've been there several more times to buy their wonderful Barako coffee because in
Whoa.
the yeah in their wet market they have a lot of that. And so I bought
Yeah.
the freshly ground beans and would end up with a 6 month supply. Yeah. So you're probably wondering, Raul, why did I interview Raymond?
Yeah. Please.
Okay. Now, for our viewers, the reason why I interviewed Raymond is because of the following facts. Number one, he was born legally deaf. In other
Right.
words, he can barely hear anything. In fact, if I were, say, an arm's length from him and I spoke in my normal voice, he wouldn't hear that. He
Okay.
simply wouldn't hear that. And even if I shout, uh, he might hear a little, but really not enough to understand what I was saying. So in the footage that we'll be showing later on, you will see Raymond doing what we call sign language.
Okay.
And though I know a little sign language, I struggled to keep up with him because he was using what I can best describe as sort of like a dialect of sign language that I'm not familiar with. Because,
Oh.
to the truly deaf people, those who are really used to being deaf and mute, they sign faster than we do. Because
Mhm.
for those of us who just learn sign language, like for example, we'll say, "How are you?" So I go, "How are you?" But for those with even lower skill levels, then they'll spell it out. How, Areryou,
Mhm,
and the
mhm.
question mark, right?
Oh yeah.
Now I tell you what, between two hearing people, when you see somebody finger spelling, then of course you're very patient. You understand they're just learning. But to somebody who's been signing for decades, when they see somebody going you know, uh, how are you? They get really, really impatient, so they'll go, how are you?
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So that would be the normal speed. But with Raymond, he he has an even. It's almost like steno. It's almost like steno
Like
that it just totally left me in the dust. And so his family understands him, especially his sister, but I couldn't keep up. I couldn't keep up. But nonetheless, um, I have a question for you, Raul, and maybe you can validate this. In
okay.
Sutherland, are there any persons with disabilities working in the office?
Mm. In the time that I've been there, yes, I've met two. One with polio, one who was struggling with polio, and the second person who, yes, who had a limp, yes, who had a
Oh,
limp,
okay.
yes, who would walk on crutches, yes, that's the
Mm.
second one.
So in other words, Sutherland is willing to take on individuals as long as they can
Yes,
do the typing, the talking,
right.
and beyond that, they're still qualified.
That's right. As long as they're qualified and they have the attitude, that's fine.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Mhm.
I do know that in some countries, like in the U.S., where my sister comes from now, she was telling me that some companies get tax breaks when they hire persons with disabilities. Like if a company were to hire a blind person,
Mhm.
or if a
Yes.
company were to hire somebody who couldn't walk anymore, so has to be taken in with a wheelchair, they get tax incentives for that, for hiring those individuals. And I think some of our call centers actually have those. Um, that's what I heard.
Yes, they do. Actually, we consider this industry is an equal opportunity employer, and uh, as long as you show that you have the capability and you're willing to do the work, you're brought in.
Outstanding.
Mhm.
So, continuing with my story about Raymond, and what really intrigued me about him is this. He was born deaf, and while he could talk, he can't really form the words because he can't hear how he sounds. And
Yes.
so he would more or less do something like like that. So
Ah, wow.
can't really seriously talk.
Uh-huh.
So when he was young, born as he was that way, um, I'm sure, had difficulty with school. Whenever he went to school, people would tease him, and sometimes he'd get bullied. But even then, he showed his very indefatigable spirit, his resiliency, because he never let that get him down. And so determined was he to be able to help his family, his parents and his siblings. He found work in a major private university as an admin assistant. At
Oh,
first, at first they were hesitant to hire him, but he convinced them that he could do the work because he had learned enough to be really fast at typing.
that's
You know,
amazing.
so he could type really, really fast because back then his sight was okay. So he typed, he did filing work, he did admin work for the professors of that school, and he was getting paid for that. And it got so that he was in fact interviewed by another news outlet to talk about his special abilities, as it were. And I think the school was thinking about offering him a scholarship for for him to continue growing. Until one day, as he was walking down the street, he was hit by a tricycle. My guess is because he's deaf, and this is true, huh? By the way, if you have friends who are deaf, they're always in great danger of being
True.
involved in accidents because they can't hear.
Yes, yes, that's true. Yeah.
So when he was crossing the road, my guess is the tricycle driver probably was honking his horn.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Of course, he didn't hear that, and since
Do that. Yeah.
he wasn't with anybody, the tricycle driver didn't even try to slow down. It hit him, knocked him to the ground, almost rendered him unconscious. But he did suffer a concussion. And during the hospitalization, so he was taken to the hospital. And by the way, the tricycle driver, for those of you who are wondering, he was caught and he was made to pony up for the cost of the X-ray and the treatment that Raymond underwent. But of course, being a tricycle driver, he doesn't really have a lot of money. And what eventually happened with Raymond was that um, he started to lose his sight.
Oh my. That's
So
terrible.
he's already deaf. I mean, that's tough enough as it is. But he began to lose his sight. Apparently, the concussion hurt his optic nerve. And so today, he is what you would call legal blind
My gosh.
because all he can see are shadows. So he wouldn't even see your face and he can barely hear you. So imagine being in a world where your mind is sharp and you know you have skills, but you're legally deaf and legally blind. Now, what made him really intriguing to me and why I went all the way to Cuenca, Batangas to interview him and get footage of him, which our viewers will see in a little bit, is that, believe it or not, he cleans the house by himself.
Wow.
He cooks
Wow.
food for the family by himself. He does the laundry by himself. He can help with, say, preparing the barbecue that they're going to sell at the local wet market. So he can't see a thing, he can't hear anything, but it turns out that he developed a coping mechanism for his limitations. See, his sense of touch is heightened, his sense of smell is heightened, his sense of spatial awareness is heightened. So in sign language, I joked with him and I said, I'm sure that you're helping your family already because in the event of a brownout or whatever, or you don't even need to turn on any of the lights to get around the house. I mean, what for if you don't have your sight? So, and it's true, Raul, because what happened as I was observing him is like this. Even if you turn off all the lights, he wouldn't bump into any of the furniture. Um,
Ooh.
Muscle memory for him is so good that he knows that if he takes 4 steps of, say, 12 inches each, and then hangs a right, that would take him to the toilet. He knows that. And he knows that once he enters the toilet, if he reaches out with his right hand, he will hit the switch or any other thing that needs like the soap or the shampoo. He knows, you know. And because of that, as you can imagine, he becomes such a control person. He doesn't like anybody moving the furniture
Mhm.
or moving where the knives, the forks, the spoons, the plates are, because that's where he remembers them. So he goes about the house walking like he can see, but you know he can't. You know he can't because if you stand in front of him, he'll bump into you. But if you get out of his way and you just watch him move about, it's as though he weren't blind at all. So when he cleans the room, he has a system. It's like what we call the katol, the mosquito killer. He'll start from one corner of the room, go around the perimeter until he ends up in the center, all the while sweeping the dust from every square inch of that room. And of course, he'll move the furniture. So, us sighted people, when we clean a room, what we do is we poke the broom or the
Right,
vacuum cleaner under the chair, and
right.
that's what we try to do. He's more thorough than that. He'll move the chair and then sweep the floor under the chair. When he's done with that, so it's very methodical. He'll put the chair back. He won't push it. He'll lift it back because he doesn't want to move the dust that or hit the dust that he just swept carefully by sliding the chair. So he will lift the chair. And then after about an hour, he'll end up with a tidy pile of dust in the center of the room where he left the dustpan to begin with. So,
Wow, it's
you
very
know,
systematic.
he's
Yeah.
very systematic. So I imagine if he were to put together a jigsaw puzzle, he'd do the same thing. He'd start with the corners and work his way in towards the center, doing everything by touch, everything by feel. Hmm. And I wouldn't be surprised if it looked right anyway, just like the cover on the box, that he would still be able to assemble the puzzle that way. So that's what he does. And then when he cooks, he knows where all of the pots and pans are. He knows where all the ingredients are, the utensils are, and so he does. And so later on, I'll be showing. Maybe I'll even show the footage in the center of
Mhm.
our recording, where you'll see him doing various things. And when I asked him, uh, Raymond, has this made you depressed? Has this gotten you down? And he said to me, no, it hasn't. All he feels is a little loneliness because not everybody in the house can sign language, or not everybody in the house um, sometimes because they're all busy trying to earn a living. So on many occasions he's left in the house with nobody to interact with, and so he's filled with energy. And even though he's a little younger than I am, he doesn't look it. He looks like he's still in his 30s, slim. And if you know Con, of course,
Yeah.
he reminds me of Con
Oh,
because that's his build. Not
it's
not an ounce of fat on the guy. Not because he doesn't like to eat. He does. He has a strong appetite, but he seldom gains weight because he's always doing something in the house. So with nobody to really talk to, the whole day he keeps himself busy. So they have no helper. He does everything. everything in the house. So his mother really just helps a little, but he takes great pride in being able to do all of that so that she doesn't have to. So I asked him, Raymond, what would you like to do, with the rest of your life? And he told me in sign language. He was close to tears when he was saying it because I guess he'd wanted to say it for a long time, but nobody really knew that this was in his heart. He said, I would love to teach sign language. And that blew me away. Why? Because he's right. The best way to learn sign language is not by sight. You look at this is A, B, C, D, E. That's not the way to learn sign language. The way to learn sign language, and that's why he can, I believed him when he said he can be a good teacher, is this.
True.
The best way to learn sign language is not with what you see your fingers look like, but to remember what your hand felt like. Okay, let me explain.
Mhm.
Without looking at my hand, I know this is an A
Mhm.
because all of my fingers are touching my palm except my thumb.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's
That's right.
what an A feels like. Never mind that that's what it looks like, right? This is what a B feels like. All of my fingers are up, but my thumb is touching my palm. That's a B. And when I go to a C, none of my fingers are touching my palm. That's a C. This is a D. So those fingers touch each other, but my forefinger is up. That's D. And this is an E, which kind of looks like a tiger claw. And
Mhm.
this is how it feels. So you can, in fact, teach sign language to a group of people who are sighted. You can turn off the light if you want to, and that will help them learn it faster. Because I remember when I was learning sign language with Bob Serrano of the singing group Tux, and he's very fluent. All of us who are sighted looking at him, um, when he was doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, when he was doing that, all of us crowded in to look at his finger. He said, no, 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 no. Stay where you are. Remember how it feels, not how it looks. Hmm. And so, yeah, I feel that he could still do that. If anybody will take him, he could very quickly and easily teach people how to do sign language, and I may even enroll because I want to learn that dialect, that shortcut that he's teaching people, that he's using to communicate with people. Yeah.
And that's amazing because when you learn from someone who has gone through the experience, and because of the need, definitely he would be able to show certain shortcuts. And the fact that he would like to teach, I have this feeling that a number of people could really learn from him. I certainly hope he has made some headway with his ambition.
At the moment, no. Um,
Oh.
because I realize there are also some limits. Like for example, if a company or a school that teaches sign language were to take him in, they would have to give him his own place so that he doesn't have to
Oh.
commute. And they would have to let him acclimatize to the new building because, of course, that's not his house where he knows where everything is. They have to let him get used to where everything is.
Mhm.
And people would have to understand what his dilemmas are and
Mhm.
be supportive. But once he acclimatizes, that's when he can work his magic. That's
Oh,
when he
okay.
can teach. Because he's very patient. When my daughter and I were talking to him and my son, he was teaching the two of them. And he was very, very patient, even if they were kind of slow to learn. Um, and the truth is, people who aren't deaf and who aren't blind who aren't mute um, take a longer time to learn because there is no real motivation for them to learn. But he's very patient because he understands that he does. And so siguro for my final words, Raul, I would just like to call on our viewers. If you have a sign language school and you're looking for somebody who's really devoted and
That's
willing to teach.
Yes. You know, this this gentleman Raymond. He reminds me of that famous character, Helen Keller. He reminds me of Helen Keller. Right? That's a very similar story, if I may say so. And
Mhm.
and plus, if only he would find some way to get his passion to teach in action, I'm sure he would make an effective mentor. Oh, I'm how I'm just curious. How does he develop his vocabulary or communication skills? Is there an opportunity for that as far as Raymond is concerned?
Fair question. From what I know of him, when he was a young child, he was taken to a sign language school where he did learn the basics. And because back then he had his sight, and he was a very sociable person, he would converse with them in sign. And between two people who are gifted with being fluent in sign language, they eventually develop shortcuts. They
Mhm.
eventually develop shortcuts. Like for example, I could say, "Do you KNOW know HIM question mark? Do you know him?" That I do something like that. But to Raymond, he might do this. He'll point at you, and he'll point at the other person and just say this. This is sign language for news. So
Mhm.
if you stitch that together, it's like he's saying, "Do you know each other?" Like that, news. Yeah. So yeah, he develops a very, very broad vocabulary.
Oh,
I
that's
suspect way more than the 300 some 60 words that I know that I don't have the finger spell. um,
oh.
yeah, so he can be very, very fluent and he can help people really level up their sign language skills if they want. So, especially if there are families with members who are deaf mute and you
Mhm.
want to be able to communicate with them faster, better. I would if I were you, I would ask Raymond to teach me.
Oh, okay. In your estimate, Dino, how long do you think would it take for an interested party to get to know more about sign language if they were to
Hmm.
get Raymond as a mentor? Or
Well, I'm going to fall back on my own experience as a sighted person, so I'm not blind and I'm not deaf, but I was interested to learn the language because in our church we still do have a deaf ministry. So when the pastor is talking, somebody is always nearby signing for the deaf mute to attend our church. And so I took up a class on sign language, basic sign language from Bob Serrano. And that was 16 Saturdays long, about an hour or two per session. Um, I don't know about what other schools do to teach it or how long it would take other schools to do that. Maybe Julie Esguerra, one of my friends on FB, could probably
yeah,
tell us because I think she's the executive director of Philippine Institute for the Deaf.
true.
She might be able to tell us more. But I know that Bob's motivation for doing classes only once a week and only about an hour or so was that he didn't want us to get information overload because this is a difficult skill to learn. And so he would teach us a little at a time. and challenge us during the week to look for a deaf mute person to practice with, or that we would practice with one another. Just like any language that you try to learn, like Spanish or French, you would need somebody who speaks the language to practice on. So you say it the right way, especially with the pronunciation, the intonation. So for me, at least my own experience, it took me 16 weeks to get up to the very barest minimum of learning how to communicate with the deaf.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So I can just I can just imagine if if our good friend Raymond were to have some uh, learners, it would definitely have to be face to face. There's
Oh,
no
yeah.
way this can be done in a virtual setting. W- That means they would have to travel all the way to Cuenca.
Mm, I guess I would say that because sometimes when I do my online webinars, I do have now and then some people who can't hear, but they're in my session online, but they can see. So what I've learned to do with them is I finger spell, you know, and they can see my finger spelling, so they're still learning even if it's not live. So
Mm.
I do believe that, but I'd love somebody who's an expert on this, like maybe Julie, uh, to communicate that with me. Is it possible to teach sign language online? Because if it is, then Raymond can teach without ever leaving his house. That'd be great. Hmm.
Mhm.
Because I know that I can teach finger spelling, see, uh, online because you'd see it and then you'd follow it. Um, because otherwise, why would people make YouTube videos on how to learn sign language,
True. True.
right?
Mm.
So we know
Right.
that it's possible.
Hmm.
Um, so maybe that's one of the things he can do if no one can hire him because of the logistical difficulties and the difficulties in getting him to and from the school. Maybe what I can do is help him and his family learn to create YouTube
Mm.
videos that would eventually get monetized, and then
Yes.
he
Yes.
can just teach the world sign language.
Right.
Maybe,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that would work. Yeah, that would
Mm,
work. Yeah, he would each day he would have a YouTube. He'd probably teach a word or a letter or two, and yes, that would
mm.
help little by little. He would have a growing fan base.
So
Yes.
I guess the message I'd like to leave with our viewers, the final words, would be simply this: Raymond Cuevas, deaf and now legally blind, but still hopeful, still positive, still willing to contribute and live his life. So for the rest of us who have no difficulties, we should not let ourselves give up, and that would be my message for our viewers. Over to
Mhm.
you, Raul.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dino. So
Very
you
welcome.
know, yeah, thank you very much, Dino. And ladies and gentlemen, if you liked this episode, please click on the like, share, and subscribe to get notified about the new shows, especially the upcoming ones. And our guests for episode 4 will be Alan Colico, who will talk about disaster scenarios and how your barangay can help you. So, ladies and gentlemen, always remember that learning is a never ending journey with limitless vistas. Good day.